And welcome. We're still waiting for some people to begin, but for everyone who's just dropping in now, if you could maybe introduce yourself in the chat and say where you're from. Do you have horses? Are you interested in changing your grazing system and what's currently holding you back from doing so? And otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar, which is called Healthy Horse, Healthy Land, How and Why to Turn Your Horse Field into a Meadow. We're joined by Dr. Radka Gromnicova, and it's great to see so many people on the attendance list. And we really boosted numbers really dramatically over the past few days. So that's really good to see. And I think it's a sign of how needed this talk is. I don't want to take up too much of Radka's time, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions and they're already coming in. So I'll just say, as usual, this webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available on the PFLA YouTube channel over the next few days. And in terms of questions for the Q&A, please feel free to put those in the chat, the Q&A box, which is at the bottom right of the screen. And you can just pop them in through the presentation, and Sarah and I will pick them up as many as we can during the Q&A after Radka's finished speaking. So with that, I'll just hand over to Radka now. I think she'll do a better job of introducing herself anyway. So Radka, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me to give this opportunity to tell you, talk about how to manage your horses better. My name is Radka Gromnicova. I'm a scientist at the Open University here in Milton Keynes in the UK. And I also am an owner of a business that is called Natureway Farm, which supports regenerative farmers and brings their produce to people in Milton Keynes and nationwide. And today this talk will be structured about, we will be talking about what healthy land means and how healthy land will make your horse healthy and support you in that way. So let me share my screen. Okay. And okay, so firstly, what is a healthy land and what is an unhealthy land? So if you go to your paddock and have a look down onto the floor and be very objective what you see. Look at the spacing in between plants, look at whether you have bare soil, what kind of distribution there is of grasses and weeds. And also after it rains, do you see the water sitting on the surface of your soil or is it sinking in? Also look at whether you have some moss, the weed percentage, and all of these signs are signs of an unhealthy land. It's a system that is not working correctly. On the other hand, and it's also the reason why farmers complain about horse people, that they are damaging land. However, you do not have to damage your land. You can create a meadow. So what a healthy land looks like, if you look into it, it's very difficult to see individual plants. You need to really look, and all the plants are spaced very densely. So you can't see any bare soil. There is a huge biodiversity of plant species. So if you were to look in just 1 square meter, you could count many plant species. Another thing is that the manure, it's very hard to see, so it degrades very quickly. So that means that the insects and everything is working correctly. So that means what is a healthy land? Plus, it's growing very tall and dense and thick. So tall, I mean over 30 centimeters tall. And that I mean in the growing season. It's different story in the non-growing season. But this talk will be more about the growing season and what happens in the growing season. So this talk is going to be started with what I used to do. I used to do what everybody does in the horse world, and how I discovered the new way. Then I will show you my first years of experimentation, how I was trying it out and adjusting and adapting until I found a system that worked. I will show you the transformations that I have witnessed, and then we will talk about what means healthy horse and how it will save you work and money. We will talk about stages of grass growth and how that is very crucial to your horse nutrition. So it really will depend, it will be then your decisions to be made about what your horse actually needs, and you will target the grass growth to that stage. So you are not just working with whatever happens out there. And then we will talk about a bit more how to do it yourself. So we will discuss, I will show you how to plan and split your field into grazing units. And then we will talk about the rules, how to make your management successful, because there are several things you need to do. So firstly, if we think about the standard approach of the management and how it differs with the natural approach of the management throughout the year. So if we look between January to December, in the standard approach, if we think of the hay usage, we can see that between October till beginning of May, you are using a lot of hay. And also sometimes in the drought of the summer, when the grass is very poor, you may need to use hay. Another thing that is very regular is that everybody feeds hard feed and supplements. Whole year, it's very regular for the whole year. You may skip it during the May-June time, but other than that, it's very typical to feed lots of hard feed on a regular basis. Next thing is, if you consider if your horse is living outside, depending on your climate where you are, there might be few months of the year where you need to stable it more likely because the land is too wet to keep the horse on it, and they would poach it and damage it quite significantly. So between about January into March in this country, in the UK, stabling is more likely when you need to think about what to do with your horse. When we think about grass, when the grass starts growing finally, then we have to consider that there are some problems with it, and you need to then start thinking, oh, my horse has laminitis or can have colic. I need to be very careful between May to mid-June when the grass is at its peak growth, and somehow manage this problem. And then on the other hand, when the grass growth slows down, when the drought comes around August time, July, August, depending on the season, then you end up with little grass of low quality and the horses seems to be hungry. So this is sort of the standard approach of the horse world, how people manage horses. And there is a lot of inputs, as you can see. Now, if we start to manage naturally for the healthy land, we reduce the hay usage as first. So there is about 1 month reduction, and there is also reduction throughout the months as you still continue having grass in your fields. In saying that, if we think about countries that have proper winters, probably they don't, because it goes properly to sleep in winter. But in this country, in the UK, the grass continues growing even in the winter, so you do have also some grass in the winter, which means that you can reduce your hay usage. And another thing is with natural management is that you do not need to feed any hard feeds and supplements. That is a big thing. I have discovered it just by accident. I think that is something that you will discover as you go along. When you bring the bucket there for your horses and the horses don't even finish it, or they sort of don't seem too interested in it, or when you are exercising them, they seem to have way too much energy than you need them to have. So in those cases, yeah, you just take the hard feed out and see what happens, and then you see they're actually not different. They are just at the right energy levels. They are not losing weight or anything like that. So then you know you are on the right path. Next thing, in terms of the stabling with the natural management, I find that depending again on your land, whether it's very soggy, very waterlogged, depends really. But I found that in general, between 5 to 10 days per year, I need to think about where to put the horses so they don't damage the land. And that's, it's only 5 to 10 days per year. And it just may be like overnight for one day or during the day, just depending on the weather forecast. So you can see just in this comparison how much input is needed for the standard approach, because the pasture is not providing what it should be providing, which is a quality grass for your horse. So we did what everyone does. We fed our horse hard feed during summer. So on the left is the picture in summer, and on the right is a picture of a typical pasture where it's very shortly grazed. So this wasn't all pooping pasture, but the horses were picking areas where they grazed it very tight, and then the areas that were sort of the toilets, or where they pooed and weed, and then they didn't touch them, and then they turned into nettles or any other weed problems. And then we moved house, and we were lucky enough to have fields around the house, so I could continue seeing what's going on. And our first winter was muddy, let's say, and this was, you can see on the left, the horses standing by a hay feeder, and this is the highest lying field that we had, and it's still turned into mud. The lower picture, you can see that's about mid-June, early June, so that's the peak growing season, and we can see how little grass we had. We tried to avoid the muddy gateways, so we sort of moved the mud away from the gate, really. We didn't really avoid them. But that was the management that I used to do, and I wasn't happy with it either. And then I discovered about regenerative farming practices. Now, for those who don't know what they mean, is that it's farmers managing their livestock in a way that they mimic natural ecosystem, evolutionary ecosystem of the grassland and the grazing animals. Because if you think of how grasslands evolved, there used to be huge herds, millions of animals moving across landscape and grazing it bit at a time, obviously, as they moved along. They were in a herd to protect themselves from predators, and they wouldn't come back to the same piece in the landscape until it has fully recovered. So in the same principles, that's what the farmers are doing. And how it works is that because we do not have predators, we do not have huge herds of herbivores, we need to mimic it in a way. So what they use is that they use electric fencing, so they keep them in a herd, and then they move them on a regular basis, and that means every day or 1 to 3 days to a new piece of the field, and they do not come back to that same piece until it's fully recovered, and that takes between 30 to 90 days, depending on the season again. You can see it in the bottom picture, so the cattle are in this long area of the field, fenced in. So I wondered whether this could be possible with horses. Can I do the same principle with horses? Because I was so intrigued by the whole system, which not only mimics what nature does, but it also does what very, very beneficial things for the environment. So for one thing, it stores CO2 from the air into the soil, because grasses have the incredible ability to regrow really quickly after they have been grazed. And as they are regrowing, they are pumping sugars, which they have created from water, air, and CO2 and water. They create sugars which form their leaves, and they also share this sugar in their root zones with the microbes and other soil life, which then bring them nutrients in a form that they can absorb. And whilst the microbes eat this sugar, they also build it into a stable carbon within the soil. Now, over the thousands of years that the grasslands have evolved, they have created very deep soils rich in carbons that we are now farming. So and now this is not just a benefit in terms of global warming, because we can slow global warming in this way when we can store all this excess CO2 in the soil. But this carbon, when it's in the soil, it also helps to hold water. So it is then the whole landscape is then more stable against the weather extremes we are now seeing, which are the floods and the droughts. So I was amazed by by all this information, and I wanted to try it myself. So I was giving it a go, but it wasn't. I didn't know really what I was doing, and so I had about 30 days rest before I came back to the same area, but it was not enough. But I didn't know at the time. When I went to a course with Paige to see her farm, she actually showed us what the grass should look like. Which is here on the picture. So it should be fully expressed, which is here flowering, and very tall and dense. And she also showed that trampling the grass is a good thing. So from then on, I started to experiment with my own system, and I have been able to change this field that you can see at the top, which is our top field, which I used to see from the window, into this one. So I have my grazing units, and I was moving, I think it was about between 60 to 70 days rest. And this field was able to grow the most grass, which is about 50 centimeters. Now this field was quite hammered. We hammered it ourselves with the horses, and before it was used for sheep. They used to feed sheep there in the winter. So it was very compacted. So to grow this much grass and this tall and thick, that was a big result for me. Now, in the bottom fields where we hammered it ourselves, it looked like this. So it was a very thick, long grass up to my chest in places. And it regenerated in a way that I didn't imagine. But I was just following the system, and it seemed to be working. Now, this is a picture of the horse. So it's the same field that the pictures of the grass are from. And you can see that there is plenty of grass for him to eat, as well as he's trampling a lot down, pooing on some stuff. So they do not have to eat everything. So the whole purpose of this is that they eat about 50%, 30 to 50%, and then they trample and poo on the rest. So you are leaving a larger residue of grass behind you. Now, unfortunately, we had to move house, which was very sad for me because it took 2 seasons to get to that place. And so, yeah, it was very sad to move, but we had to move. And where we were considering going was this field, which you can see here on the right. So it's about over 2-acre field. It has had horses there for the past 20 years. It was pooping during that time. And when I went there first, so the previous people left about August. We went there, middle of August. I went there, and my first reaction was, where is the grass? There was no grass. So you can see the dry areas. Now, this is a picture from very ridiculously dry summer, but you can see the dry patches in the field at the sort of the top of the field. And then at the bottom, you can see these green patches, which were actually the toilet areas of the horses where they pooed and weed, and then the nettles were growing. So it was full of nettles and sort of here and there some grass. But other than that, it was pretty much dead. The picture on the left is a picture of a little bit later in the season. So you can see what it was like. We had some bare soil, some moss, a few little stables of grass, some weeds, but yeah, nothing significant. So what I have decided at the point when we said, okay, we will go to this field, to this place, but we won't go here immediately. We will give it 2 months rest, and we will see what happens. So we came there in the 1st of October, but after 2 months of rest, nothing really happened much. There was not many changes that happened. So I concluded that it's not the rest that this field needs, it's the fertility that it needs. Bear in mind, it was being poo-picked, and the manure itself is the fertility of the grass that has passed through the horse. And if you continually remove it, you keep continually removing the fertility. The soil of this field was very compacted and sandy, whereas the field next door to us, which doesn't have any animals on it, the neighbor just mows it, that has a very nice, loamy, dark, spongy soil. So I could see what has happened in this field, a lot of erosion, compaction, and bad management, and what it could be, which was next door. So we started again, and as I said, the decision was we have to increase fertility in this field. So this is 3 months later. This is in beginning of January. This was last year or 2 years before. And so we had our horses in these grazing units, but there was nothing to graze really. So we were feeding them hay, and they were pooping it the other side, which is great fertility that I was bringing in, which was from the hay into the poo. And then I would spread the poo, move them on again. And they would be in these enclosures, in these grazing pens for about 3 days, and we wouldn't come back until about 90 days later. So now today, what it is now today is to me, it's very surprising, because we had bare, there was no grass in the gateways. There was some very bare area where the horses were rolling. The grass wasn't growing. So in the first season, we saw some growth, about 30 centimeters, which was the most the grass could do at the time. This year, on the other hand, that took me quite by surprise, but this is what it looked this June. So the grass has just flourished. It went crazy, thick, dense, tall, lush. In places, it would be up to my chest, and otherwise it was knee height, hip height. So incredible transformation that I was witnessed in. And in fact, every day I move the horses, I'm still amazed by how much grass there is. Now, what benefits is this giving me? Why am I managing this differently? So I'm managing it because I'm keeping the grass at the nutritional stage that I need for my horses. We will be talking about it just in a moment. But it allows me to control the weight. It allows me to control their behavior so they are not too excitable. And also there is so much higher biodiversity, and I'm increasing the biodiversity all the time. There is about 40 plant species that the horses can choose from during the year. In the first growing season, I had to keep the horses separate because the white horse is very dominant over the brown horse. So I had to keep them separate because there was a food competition. But this year, now we have so much grass, I can keep them together. There is no food competition. So that is sort of sorted. It saves me time. If you can see this post at the foreground, the white post. So that's just where the horses have been the previous day. So what I basically do, I have another set of white posts, which I take over, put them at the back of behind the horses, build another pen there. I have another set of white tape. And then I just put the white tape up and let the horses in it, and that's job done. Then I just move the water, build the back fence as they are grazing, and that's it. So it takes me about 10 minutes every day. I do not need to poo pick. We will talk about the poo picking as well in later on. But it's very important that you do not poo pick, and it's not necessary. It is the fertility that should stay at the land, on your land. I don't need to use hard feed. Absolutely not necessary. That they have more food that they need. So I'm saving money on feed, on hay, because I don't need to. I used to have to feed hay during the summer months, so during about July, August. Otherwise, they were hungry and they would be fighting, or I don't know, trying to escape or something. So I had to feed them. But this time, I do not need to do anything like that. Now you can do this too. This is not just like somebody can do it, but you can do it too. It is not difficult, and you can manage your horse properly based on what your horse's needs are. You will then achieve to have stable mood, behavior, and health, whatever you need it to be. And over time, you will save money and time. But what is more, you will also create wildlife habitat and do something beneficial for the environment. So that is the good one. Even though if you don't believe into the fact that the grassland can store carbon, at least you can create wildlife habitat for butterflies and other insects and birds. So now is the big topic of feeding your horse the grass it needs. And I can just see if I can. I'm not sure whether I can somehow use my. I don't know. Can you see my mouse?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. So, so this is just the grass growth curve during its season. This starts from the seed, but it's the same principles. If you graze it short, and just as it's regrowing, the few new blades. So there's the same principles. So a few new blades coming up. If you look down here, you can see how high sugar levels there are in these few new blades. But you know it yourself probably, if you tasted that grass that is just coming up, it's very sweet. There is no fiber in it. Yeah, for the horses, it's just like eating sweets. They love it. Now, if you look as the grass is growing, so it's growing then more leaves, you can see the sugar level starting to go down. But as it's coming up, so this is a flower stem that is coming up. You can see it's going down. Now protein levels are going high, very high, before it flowers. So this is then the flowering stage. Now, what is the flowering stage is when you see the grass and it has got the pollen on it, the white, yellowy stuff. That's the flowering stage. So if you look at the flowering stage, then it's the seed head stage. The flowering stage, have a look how that the protein levels are decreasing, the sugar levels are decreasing, the sugar levels are the lowest at the seed head stage. And you can also see the fiber levels, how they are increasing as the grass is getting stalkier, basically. It's more fibrous. So looking at this, you can now say and make a decision on what your horse needs. For example, if you have a rescue horse or you have a foal that needs very high protein, so you want to put weight on it, then you need the grass at this stage when it's before it flowers. Whereas if you have a sort of a good doer or sort of a normal horse, so it's about this flower to seed head stage. Now, if you do have a horse with a problem like laminitis, colic, or obesity, definitely just keep it at the seed head stage. So this is the seed head stage because it's the lowest in all the nutrients. In this picture, they cut it for hay, so it starts to regrow and the sugars are increasing, but in your case, you are not cutting it. So now you can see, you can now choose the way you want your grass to be. Now, as soon as you graze it, it will start to regrow. So it will start to have these sweet shoots again. So you must not be in that place whilst this is happening. Otherwise, you will just do the same. So you will still have very high sugars. So the tightly cropped fields of horses, they are just eating the sugary stuff all the time on this stuff. Right, so this is just an example from the field. You can see, so this is the flowering grasses. You can just about see perhaps some whitey yellow pollen. And this is after they have grazed it. So you can see they've trampled about 50% and they grazed about 50, maybe a bit more percent. Now, when you are doing this, it's very important that you keep an eye on the horse manure to see what's going on. If you kick it open, if the manure is green, is runny, it's a bit more like cow manure, that's not a good sign. That means the horse is not digesting it properly. It's too high in sugars, so you need more fiber in the diet. Whereas in this case, I can see that the horses are just perfect, so everything is being digested. It's nice yellowy brown or brown, so everything is on the right track. So how do you start? So first you need to know what you have in terms of, do you have a short grass to start with, or do you have tall grass to start with? Also, what size of area do you have? Now, as a general guide, I would say 1 acre per standard size horse, 0.7 acre for small horse or a pony, and half an acre for a small pony. How you judge that is that you look at the belly size of the horse, and if that belly size is equivalent to a large horse, then it will eat as much. So it just depends how big a belly the horse has got, which means how much gut it has. Okay, the next thing that you need to do is assess where you are at and what the land may need. As I have told you about my decisions in terms of the fertility. So if you have a look at your land and if the grass is short, it's not growing, and you can see soil surface, moss or weeds, then in that case you need long recovery period for the land to restore. That's about 70 to 90 days after you've grazed it. So what you will need to do is to split the land into grazing units. And the grazing unit is an area where the horse is for 3 days, which is the maximum in the growing season, to 5 days in the non-growing season. If you do have a proper non-growing season, like it freezes, where the grass is actually not growing, then you can extend it to 10 days or anything like that. So it really depends on the grass growth, what is happening with the grass. You can always have a look what's happening in the grazing unit before, so the one that you came from, and have a look at the grass, how it's regrowing. Even in the winter it can grow, so just bear that in mind. Now the 3 days are there because after 3 days you will be overgrazing, and we will talk about what overgrazing means. So in practice then, if you graze for 3 days and have about 70 days recovery period, that's 70 divided by 3, that means you will need 23 to 24 grazing units. So you need to split your field into these grazing units. Now, if you say, I need much longer recovery period, so if you graze for 3 days and you have 90-day recovering period, that's 90 divided by 3, that's 30 grazing units that you need. So let's just have a look at it in practice, just as an example what it means. So, what you do is that you go out, you either measure your field in Google Maps, or you go out there and pace it, and then you split it into the grazing units. So here is just basic split into 3 times 10, so 30 grazing units. So you can either keep the horses there 2 days in each, which then means that there would be 60 days recovery, or you can keep the horse there for 3 days, and then there will be 90 days recovery. So if you go out there, you pace it, then you say, okay, I want this recovery. Then you go back to your paper, you make your splits of the field, then you go back to the land, and then you pace the size of your grazing unit. Then I would pace it, put a white stick on 4 corners, and just have a look and judge, is this big enough for my horse? Is this big enough space for them to be? Now, when you are starting out, you are not going to have enough grass, I assume. So you will need to feed hay in the first, at least the round, depending on how quick your land is going to regenerate. So you may need to supplement your horse with hay, so it's happy and is not hungry. So you have a look at the size of the land and you say, okay, this is not particularly big, I think. So that is still okay, because what you can do is that you just keep them there for 2 or 3 days. And then as you move to the next one, you extend your back fence, which is this one, to the previous one. Okay, so you just give the horses more space to move. So that's also possible. Plus, if you have a good doer and a bad doer, what you can also do is that you move your bad doer first into the paddock, let it eat the sweet shoots first, and then maybe for a day, 2 days, just depends how you judge it. And then you move your good doer in there, so there is only the stalky bit left for him to eat. So there's no danger of any laminitis, colic, or any problems you might be facing. So just as an example, just to show, in my case, this was last year. So the blue, I have drawn the fence perimeter, just so it's a bit more visible. There is the white horse, there's the brown horse. They are divided, so they are not fighting. And you can see that I have moved the fence. So this was their new grazing unit, and I moved it back just to give them more space to move around. So this is sort of what it looks like. Now, if you still come to the conclusion you have too small paddock, you can still do this type of grazing, but you just have to think a little bit laterally. So let me explain. So I have made this field. So this has 4 times 4 grazing units, so it's 16 units altogether. And if you say, if I spend 3 days in each grazing unit, that gives me 48 days recovery in each grazing unit. Now, if the land is quite poor, so the grass is not growing, you have got bare soil, this is not going to be enough. So maybe you should start at 60 days at least. So how you do that is that you allocate, in the first year, you allocate one of the grazing unit to become a sacrificial area. So you place the horse there, so you do your 45 days in here, 3 days in each. And then in this, then you place the horse in your sacrificial area for 15 days, and that sort of buys you time that you don't have on your land. That buys you time to give all of your paddocks, so all of your land, more rest, more recovery time. So that will buy you the time of the 60 days recovery period. Now, in your second year, if everything goes well and you have done your job well, your grass should be growing. It should be doubled or maybe even tripled. So in your second year, the 48 days recovery should be plentiful, and you should also have more grass for the horses to eat. Now, when we say 3 days in each, is up to you how you do it. You can strip graze it within your unit. So let's say you have grazed here, then you go to here, and you can just give them a strip, a third of the field, and then next day give them a third. So just to keep the level of nutrition more equal. So it's up to you really how you do it. Okay, so that's if you have small paddock. But now I have just told you sort of how to split your paddocks, grazing units, but I still haven't really told you what are the rules of the grazing, what you need to know and understand in order to be successful. So firstly, tall grass is good. The taller, the better. Now, how tall your grass can get, you may not know, but a good place to look is behind the fence or in the hedgerow where the animals didn't have access to. So have a look how tall the grass is growing there, and then you sort of see the potential of your land where it can get to. And again, if you keep it tall, if you take just the tops off, that will make the grass to grow much faster and recover faster. If you are not taking the whole plant off, because when you take the whole plant off, it takes the plant, it needs to use its root reserves to regrow. Whereas if you just take the tops, so not fully the plant, it will recover much quicker and you can regraze it much faster. So, and you are building the grass to grow taller and taller every time you graze it. Next rule is never overgraze. So now I have mentioned this word overgrazing, but what it actually means. So what it means is that when your horse is eating the regrowing grass, that it has just been grazed. So when your horse, so here on the picture, so that is just freshly grazed grass, so just the tops of being taken off. As the grass is regrowing, it will be pushing out from these tips, these new leaves, these young leaves. And as I have shown you previously, these young leaves are very sweet, very high in sugar, so it's not good for your horse and is not good for the plant. Because if you keep taking these young shoots from the plant, what happens is that you are weakening the plant all the time because it needs to use its reserves to regrow. And if the horse is in on that land whilst this plant is regrowing, eventually it will kill it. So eventually what you are doing is that you are decreasing the number of species, and you are selecting for the species who are capable of sort of creeping along the surface of the soil, where the horse is less likely to bite the whole plant. So yeah, it is detrimental to both of your land health and biodiversity. Now, overgrazing also happens not just when you keep the horse there for too long whilst the grass is regrowing, which in the peak growing season happens really quickly, is within 1 to 3 days. But it also happens when you are coming back to the land too soon. So you get there before the plant is fully recovered, you bite it again and you weaken it again. Now, it will really depend on the plant species. Some plant species regrow much quicker after they've been grazed, but they are hit the hardest if you are there too long and you graze them again whilst they are regrowing. Whereas the plant species that take longer to regrow, they are hit the hardest when you come back to it too soon and you then regraze them. So then they are weakened and potentially they will die. And then what sort of species you have and plants you have are the ones that the horses don't like so much, but they are the ones that survived because they were not targeted by the horses. Next rule is always plan on a paper. So as I showed you how you split your field into grazing units, next thing is you must plan your recovery periods and grazing periods visually on a paper. I have the resources and a detailed video how you do this on my website, but it's very important that you do it on a paper somewhere and you stick it somewhere where you see it often, like a kitchen or a tuck room, because the next rule, which is the important one, is that you keep monitoring and adapting and changing the plan often, because you may be probably wrong in what you are doing. Mainly because nature is unpredictable. We cannot predict everything. Weather can change. Your horse's needs may change. The grass recovery may not be as you planned. There's still something that you are learning about how the grass is recovering. It really depends on the species of grasses that you've got. There's too many variables that there are not in your control, and that you don't know what is going to happen. So as soon as you notice that your plan is not going as you think it should be going, you must take action immediately and replan it and think about, what am I going to do? The faster you change your actions, the less damage you are going to do to your land. For example, just to make this a little bit visual, this year we had a very cold, slow, dry spring and wet winter. So in my case, I had to keep moving the horses faster than I wanted to. I had to move them 2 days, whereas last winter, I had them 3 days in an area. And because I had to move them 2 days, that meant that I was taking quite a lot of grass off, the ones that I have grown in the summer. As the spring came, I could see that the growth wasn't coming as I planned, and I was becoming quite conscious that if I start grazing this land, I'm probably going to start overgrazing it, because it is trying to grow, is really slow, which means if I come back to it, I will be there too soon and I will start overgrazing it, and this will hit the land too much and it will affect my whole of the year and probably even the winter. So the decision then was, I need to take the horses off this land and put them in a sacrificial area whilst we are waiting for this growth season. So it was option number 1. And option number 2 was to ask the neighbor if we can graze for 3 to 4 weeks on his land and just wait there. We were fortunate that we could graze on the neighbor's land, but I was prepared to put them in a sacrificial area and wait these 3 to 4 weeks. And I think that was really beneficial because it really gave time to the land. Bear in mind how slow and frosty the spring was, to fully recover. And when we then came and started grazing whilst it was properly recovered, then it just took off to that to the size that you saw, which meant that I continued regenerating. If I made the wrong decision, and if I started and grazed it too early, and I was suspicious it was way too early for the land to take it, I would have probably knocked the land back, and I wouldn't have seen the amount of grass growth I saw this year, which means I would have had less for the winter. So it would affect my winter season as well. So it's really important to change your decisions based on what is happening on the land. And faster you do it, the less damage you are going to do. So it was, for me, it was only 3 to 4 weeks. It could have been months in the winter season that I would have been affected. So signs that your plant needs to change is that you start to see bare soil. Plants are not growing as they should. So if you want them to be flowering, they are not doing it. You seem to have more weeds than you had before. Next thing is that horses are escaping. So that means they are probably hungry or they are looking for something, and that you are running out of grass. So these are all signs you need to change, and faster you change, the less detrimental it is going to be. And the more, because you either move forward or you move backwards or you are stationary. And the idea is that you need to move forwards so you have more grass every year, and then you then are improving the land over time. Now, signs that you are on the right track is that the grass is thicker and taller. I mean, you can say it that you are on the right track. You can count more grass and fob species than before. Grass is recovering quicker after being grazed. There is no best soil amongst plants. Manure is degrading quickly. Weed numbers are declining. You have more grass than the horses can eat, and horse health and weight is improving. Pest problems are declining. Now, the reason why pest problems are declining is because you have created a habitat for predators of the pests. Because, for example, if you have lots of flies, well, it's a prey, so it's lots of food for other species. And if you create the right habitat for the species, you start to see that there isn't actually much difference, and that the pest problem is decreasing. For example, this year I have seen lots of dragonflies, and dragonflies in the grass. And dragonflies are predators of flies, mosquitoes, horseflies, so they are a perfect predator for that. So this was sort of the rules to help you to think about how you can change the management and how to make it successful. Now, there is still a few missing things that people always think about, one of which is manure management. How do you manage manure? Now, this is completely against the norm, but you must leave the manure where it is, rather on the field. Do not take it away, because this is the fertility. Imagine that the horse, bear in mind, grassland evolved with the grazing animals, it needs the manure back. So the grass provides the horse its food. It goes through the digestive system of the horse, it's coated with bacteria and all sorts, and it comes out partly digested, so partly composted, great for the soil and for the grass to be fertilized again. So that's a cycle, and if you break that cycle, you are removing the fertility and you are degrading the land. Now, in terms of the parasites, which means the worm eggs, they love to live in dark, damp areas. So if the poo is scattered, which is what I did in the first several years, if you scatter it with fork or kick it about, open it up, then you let the air, the sun, and the water penetrate, and then it basically kills the worm eggs. Now, another thing is that you are moving away from your manure all the time in your grazing units, which is what animals in nature would have done naturally. They don't like to graze where the manure is, and that's for a reason. And you keep moving your animal away from it, and you do not come back to it until 30 to 90 days later. And in this time, you have broken down the parasite cycle. They need to come into the horse, into their host within 30-day period. And if you are there, if you don't come back to it, you've solved your problem, really. I haven't wormed for the past 4 years, and we did an egg count about 2.5 years ago, and it was 0. So if you do have a horse who has lots of worm problems, I would, if you are prepared to go through this natural management, then do keep an eye on it with worm egg counting, because yes, some horses are really full of worm eggs. So yeah, just keep an eye on it. And if you do use a wormer, I would remove, in that case, I would remove the manure away, mainly because it contains the worm drugs and it affects your beetle population. So remove it away, put it somewhere else in a corner, special corner, so you're not killing the beetles, which would then help you to absorb the manure. And also read the packet on the wormer, how long it stays, it's active within the horse. So then for how long you need to keep removing the manure. But that's the only time I would remove manure. Other than that, do not poo pick. I know it looks unsightly. I know the whole system looks a little bit unsightly, that you have the grasses which is partly grazed, it's trampled, you've got this manure lying about. Here and there's a weed sticking about. It looks completely unsightly, I understand. It's just to change your system, because nature is not controlled, it's random, it's sort of it's not as we think of it, straight edges and nice and neat. Nature is random, and that's what it will look like. I'm afraid that's how it evolved.
Radka, I was just wondering, I'm just quite conscious of time and I'd love to get to some of the questions. I don't know if you're at your last slide or if you have a few more.
There's just the next is the weed management, and the last one is the bare soil, and that's it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Quite a few good ones in the Q&A.
Yeah, now with the manure, just want to say quickly, in the first year, I was moving it away from the toilet areas onto the areas which the horses graze very short, which is the areas which actually need the fertility. So that's a very good thing to do. It also stops the horse grazing in very short. So it helps to rebalance your pasture so you don't have these tall and short areas. Next thing is weed management. What do you do with weeds? Now, weeds are in your pasture for a reason. They are there to help a symptom, a problem that you have created. For example, thistles are they help with the capped soil. So if there is a bare soil and it rains, it creates a cap. But thistle is capable of penetrating this cap, which then potentially can allow other plants to penetrate it. And horses, in fact, are the best, I think, thistlers, because they eat the flowers. I noticed they eat the flowers, which completely weakens the whole plant, and then it dies. Now, in terms of ragwort, it's easy to manage in your grazing units. You either pull out the ragwort as you go into it, or after you left. So it's up to you which way you do it, but it's much easier. And the last thing is how you manage bare soil. You mustn't ever have bare soil, because then you are just asking for weeds to go in and cover the soil. So cover it yourself, cover it with scattered manure. Old hay, swept hay is perfect because it contains grass seeds, so it will reseed it for you. Or grass clippings. I use from a neighbor. He brings these grass clippings and it's very high nitrogen, so it brings in the fertility back. Okay, so to just sum it up, so I hope I gave you the idea of why is it a good thing to change your horse pasture into a meadow, and how to start thinking about how you could do it practically, how to split it into grazing units, and then how to and all the rules you have to think about of keeping the grass tall and thick, the planning and keeping the monitoring and changing your actions, because we are wrong. We do not know what nature is going to do. So just keep adapting as you go along. So, and there is more help and resources at my website, regreentheearth.org, but there is a little bit more exactly about the planning procedure, how you do the planning, how you measure your field, and then there is about the fencing and that sort of practical things. But by all means, you can email me at my email address, food@naturallyfarm.co.uk, if you struggle with anything or you are not clear with anything, just feel free to email me. But thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for all these questions.
Thank you so much, Radka. That was so interesting and so comprehensive. I'm sure we have loads of great questions. So I'll just pass over to Sarah, who I think's picked out a few to start with.
Okay, so can you hear me, everybody?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Right. So Laura had lots of questions. I've just picked out a couple. There is opinion that horses need to move as they graze to keep the digestive system working. Is this a risk with your cell grazing system? And then there was this follow-up, a second one. What happens in a ryegrass clover dominated field, which is normally higher in sugar? How do you transition without risk of colic or laminitis? And Elizabeth wanted to know your answer to that as well.
Okay, so got a lot of questions.
Yes.
So the first one was about moving.
Yes.
Now, yeah, the horses move. They walk, whether they are in a grazing unit or whether they are in a whole field. They walk, and actually, when we lift and where we overlooked our fields, it was very interesting to see how little they run. I thought, oh, they should run and play, but they don't do that very often. Most of the time they spend walking or standing, and they do the same, just the same in their grazing units. They keep moving. So yeah, that's the number one question. Number two was the grass, the ryegrass. Okay, so ryegrass and colic. Now the problem is, so ryegrass is really, yeah, it's for livestock, isn't it? So that's what it was designed for, and that it manages to be overgrazed. Now, I have been in a field where there was lots of ryegrass, and if you keep your management correct, it just it goes away. It's sort of the native species start to take over because they are more adapted to your management and to the land than your ryegrass is. When you stop overgrazing the ryegrass, just there is no point because it can't grow very tall. The ryegrass grows about 30 to 50 centimeters, but most native species grow much taller. They can grow up to your chest height, and they will soon push your ryegrass out. In terms of colic, so if you have a horse, now if you think about it, I see that ryegrass starts to come a little bit later in the year. So the first grasses that are coming are meadow species that are not ryegrasses. The ryegrass seems to come a little more like this time of year when I see them flowering. But if you just do the same principle, let them flower and eat them when they are more mature, there is no problem. Plus, sometimes if people think, oh, if you used to fertilize your pasture, so you put nitrogen there, then you would have seen problems with ryegrass because then these nitrates are in the plant and horses can't digest it properly, and then it can cause in livestock bloat and in horses colic. So if you don't do neither of these practices, everything will be fine. But natural system, it's just you sort of change your evolution of your pasture and you tell it what it needs to be, and then it just changes into a meadow naturally.
Okay, so the next question is, we came through the website actually before the webinar, from Carol. She's, for this year, for the first time, tried leaving the grass long in the meadow, approximately 4 acres in size. 4 horses went in there about 3 weeks ago and seemed to enjoy the variety of grass and other plants. But she would say there were a lot more flies, including biting flies, than she would normally expect if the grass was shorter. Do you find flies a problem?
No, so as I said with the pests, now if this is just a one-off when the grass was used to be short and then became long, then you haven't, because you didn't create the right habitat for your predators. So you need to think of it long term and create the right habitat for predators from early on. So not just you know, once a year when you let the grass to grow tall in July, June, July. But just think of it, you need to keep it tall all the time, and then that will have the habitats for your dragonflies and birds to deal with your problem. But yeah, I haven't seen any increase in the pests numbers with the tall grass, no. But I have seen increase in dragonflies, yeah.
Okay. A question from Alison about water. This all sounds great, but getting water can be very difficult if you're dependent on a natural water source and have more than 2 animals.
I mean, it's just change of thinking. I mean, the guys in farming, they have sorted it very well. There's lots of different systems. So if you have more than 2 horses, as you say, you need quite a bit of water. But there are different mobile systems now. You can make it yourself as well with a water pipe plug into it, and you can have it on wheels, wheel it around behind you, and then you can have a ball cock to stop the water flow, just the same like a normal water trough, but a mobile one made of like a barrel or something. So yeah, it is possible. I think if you just look around about mobile water troughs, mobile water systems, you will definitely find, because yeah, farmers are able to water their 100 odd cattle. So yeah, you can definitely do it with horses as well, and
Okay.
it's not that expensive either.
Okay. So Helen, she's concerned about the size of the grazing cells. How much percentage of body weight will the horse eat once they are in the long grass? I have 2 EMS horses who were born to eat.
Yeah, so again, if you have a lot of roughage, like I said, if the grass is at its high fiber, it takes a lot of time for the horse to digest. So it will, and chewing is longer, so the whole process is longer. So despite that you say the horse eats a lot, it can if it wants, but the grass doesn't contain many nutrients, as I showed you on the graph. So I wouldn't be concerned if you let it go to the seed head stage. You do not need to be concerned. They eat as much, I think, like horses eat certain number of hours per day, whether it's a good quality or poor quality grass, and they will do that because that's the evolutionary thing. But yeah, if you just manage for low quality grass, so seed head stage, when it's mature, it's sort of stationary. Yeah, it will take them much longer to process it for their bodies, so it will be slower, which means yeah, you will just they won't be putting on weight or anything.
Okay, so exercise. Lindsay is concerned about the size of the cells. It does not seem to give them much chance of exercise.
Okay, now, yeah, this is quite a common one. I find that, as I say, the horses, people have the idea, I know everybody has the idea, like I did, that horses run around in the field and play around together. Now, when I started the first year, the size of the grazing unit was quite small. But if you exercise your horse regularly, if you exercise your horse regularly, there is no problem, and the horse sort of tells you when it needs to be exercised or run around. Just take it for a good run around. So yeah, I didn't see a problem with that. Next thing is, this year when we had so much more grass, I could make the areas bigger. They can be together, and yeah, they run around there, play together, just the same as they would be in a whole field. So it really depends where you are at with the land, and also what you want. Depending on the size of the land, what you can do. If you can give the horse more space because you think it needs it, just do it and try it. It's really up to you. That it's just a decision process that you do, and you are in control what you want to do. So if you need to expand the size, do it. But then if it means that you need to have a sacrificial area where the horses are, whilst you are waiting for a longer recovery, that's fine too. So it's up to you how you want to do it.
Okay, thank you. Kath has asked, does this system work when stabling at night, or is the assumption that the horses are in the grazing cells for the full 3 days, 24 hours a day?
No, yeah, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, stable at night. Just yeah, you just need a bit less grass. So yeah, but it works just the same. And they are the same rules still. The grass growth doesn't sort of know you took the horse away. So yeah, you will be overgrazing it after 3 days. So you still need to think about the overgrazing issue and the recovery period. But yeah, if you are stabling the horse overnight, it's just the same rules.
Okay, Charlotte, do we want any more questions? Or...
Should we do one more and then we should probably let everyone get away? I know there's so many people who didn't get their questions, but do email Radka at her address or at ours, and we'll try and get as many questions answered as we can.
Okay, there was one, do I still need to spray weeds? What about rolling and harrowing the land?
Oh yeah, well, don't do that. Neither. Now, when you obviously take a chemical to your land, it's damaging to your soil, to all the organisms, to the good guys who are living in your pasture or in your meadow that you are trying to create. So the way I deal with weeds is that I just cut them. So if you do have like nettle patches or dock leaves, just mow them, cut them with a scythe. I have a scythe, just the old style, but you can have a strimmer that you can chop them with. As I said, they are there for a reason. So you need to remove the reason why they are there, and they will slowly disappear. Some of the plants, I believe they are also rebalancing your soil nutrients. I think the dock leaves, for example, I think they accumulate either calcium or magnesium. So when you cut them off, it will then become available to the soil as the leaves are degrading. So now they are not that bad. Plus, dock leaves are actually it's an edible plant. So yeah, if you have lots of dock leaves, they flower, set seed. You can collect the seeds, roast them in the oven, mill them into flour, and it's apparently like buckwheat flour. So yeah, you can go healthy. But yeah, I wouldn't worry much about weed. No spraying, no harrowing is needed. If you have too many horses that you can't spread the poo by kicking it about with your wellies, then I would just leave them. Yeah, they are going to degrade. It's fine. You do not need to take your harrow out. As soon as you take your harrow out, you are taking the machinery down there, compacting the soil, and then just smashing up the grass species, the young grasses that are coming out, young herbs and forbs that are coming out, which would have benefited your horse, so you would do more damage than good.
Okay, and then finally, Lawrence has just said, I like this idea a lot. It makes complete sense, and I'm glad you experimented the system with great success. I would like to give it a go. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. I hope everybody will give it a go.
Thank you so much, Radka. That was really, really interesting. And thank you for going into so much detail and taking the time for us all. It was really fascinating. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of people going with long grass grazing now.
Yeah, hopefully. Now the grazing in winter is a little bit of another topic in itself. But if somebody needs help with grazing in winter, let me know.
Maybe we can get another webinar going for that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if anyone has any further questions, yeah, please email us or Radka herself, and this webinar will be recorded and available on the PFLA YouTube after this. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you particularly to Radka, and hope you all have a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Bye, everyone.